Hello and dearly welcome to this How to Play Austria in EU4 multiplayer guide directed at newcomers and also at veterans. My name is Walrus, I'm better known as an MP veteran, playing in servers like Monkey Man's Jungle League and EPP. Austria is one of the more liked nations in Europe, while Austria is not as weak as it looks like on the map, because considering its starting size, it's rather small. Also, its development is also quite low at 171 development at the game start. It has the potential to be one of the strongest nations in all of Europe, because it's also in the center of Europe, but also close to two end nodes and into nice expansion, into nice livable land, like the Transdanubia state, or the Slovakia state, the Slavonia state, the Croatia state, and other states in the area of the past node. Austria has a kind of unique starting situation. The big problem about playing Austria is that while you have the highest maximum manpower and the highest regeneration in 1444 in front of the European nations, it's all tied to the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire is a thing that is not of that much importance in EU4 multiplayer. There are some mods that work around it, but then this guide certainly is not the perfect choice for your first thoughts about it. But usually in EU4 multiplayer, you only push to the first reform, which is called for Reichsreform, which gives you 5% construction development cost reduction. The other ones are also kind of nice to have, but not a single one is inherently broken or really strong or a must have, so let's just keep it here. You will probably also only get the first one, because everyone wants to get 5% dev cost. Later on, the HRE is usually dismantled or left, but that's a different topic for itself. Austria is surrounded by two important nations that are usually seeded and usually are not friendly with you, which would be Venice and Bohemia. While Hungary is usually also a nation that you can fight with, usually from my experience, the Hungary players are more likely to not fight you than to fight you. While Venice is rich, Venice lacks the number of provinces in the core. Like, they only have these 7 provinces in Istria. You usually are able to get Istria for free. The big problem for you is to push into Treviso, because you can easily push into Friuli at the beginning of the war and force someone to go to either Ashtal or Friuli. But you cannot really push into Treviso at the game start, because they are usually easily able to defend it with their troops, because Venice is usually really rich, and you cannot really get into here because there's a fort in Brescia, which will make it really hard to properly fight it. You cannot navally invade Venetia, which is a no-brainer considering Venice is probably the strongest or one of the strongest galley-focused nations at the game start, but, well, it's naval warfare. It's not going to win you land warfare. Bohemia, on the other side, is somewhat a side-grade nation to Austria, and you may asking yourself, why is it a side-grade nation? Bohemia was historically not as relevant as Austria. But then you realize that Bohemia gets an event early on for a pretty good ruler, the Podebrat ones, because the Permsleets are extinct, the Luxemburgs are gone. So we are here with a new dynasty. They start with Landsfriedens, which is kind of weird. As you can see here, Paradox is a perfectly fine company. They start with Silesia as 2 vassals, with Glogo and Apol, and they're usually going to integrate them kind of early on. And this also will lead to them having 2 vassals that can carpet siege a bit. Bohemia has one really important province, which is the province of Eger, which is a gold mine. Usually the goal of the Austrian side of the warfare would be to go for Eger as fast as possible, because the province in Olomouc or Olmütz would be kind of useless for your conquest. Of course, always nice to have a free fort, but it has no strategic value. Like, this is the big problem. The fort in Prague is a capital fort, so it's a tier 3 fort. And this area here, around Budweis, ob der Ems, Van Harzberg, Brünn, and a province I cannot really spell. I would call it Jindrikvuk Hradek, but it was probably wrong. You can only just push here and there. A useful fort would be up the Ems, but the problem is that you already have a fort in Vienna, and some mods forbid that you can have adjacent forts. This would disallow the fort in Mannerhardsberg, which would be later on a fort line for late game, but we're not talking about that right now. If you are in the situation in EU4 multiplayer where you have to decide where to expand to, which is probably the easiest choice. You usually have the choice with you either try to be friends with Venice or you try to be friends with Bohemia. You cannot be friends with both. That's nearly impossible. And you will probably not get the opportunity. Usually, you can try to sell out to one of them. The thing is, Austria has higher manpower regeneration, higher maximum manpower, and also a nice force number of 63, which is noticeably higher than the other two. The thing is, if you offer someone a good deal, they can probably refuse it. If I would play Austria, I would ask Bohemia, hey Bohemia, what do you think if I go for Venice, you can just go for the north of Germany? The north of Germany would consist of trade nodes. I would always recommend you to partition a nation or borders via trade nodes. That's usually the more liked way. And sometimes defensive borders with mountains can be important too. I usually go with the way that I say, you get this node and I get this node. It's usually the easiest guide because you're gonna say, oh no, I thought it would be the average state. It actually happens quite a lot, not gonna lie. I am one of the problems myself there. So, if you're Austrian, you go to Bohemia and say, hey, you get Saxony, you get parts of Lübeck, you get parts of Krakow, and you get parts of Rhineland. Like, let's say we make a border, you get South Westphalia, North Westphalia, and the North Rhine state. And I get Upper Franconia, Lower Franconia, the Palatinate, and Baden, and Switzerland. There's a perfectly fine deal for both of you, because in the early game, Bohemia struggles. Bohemia has really weak national ideas, and it wants to form a different nation. Usually it's Poland or Prussia. Let's be real, you don't want them to form either of them long term. But that's a topic where you should step them later on, together with other allies. That's not the early game. On hindsight, you can offer Venice the deal that you can make Venice the owner of all of Italy, and after some time you can also push a trade to them. You could offer them to help them in the war against Hungary and maybe the Ottomans, because the Ottomans are really weak and Hungary can be beaten by the combined force of Venice and Austria. Usually, from my experience, it's the easiest to play nice with Venice and go for Bohemia early on, because the gold mine is the higher reward play. If you go for it, it's really important to take the province of Eger. If you're going for Venice, it's really important to take the province of Treviso, because you can easily just take these ones. Like, these ones are pretty worthless. Venice is probably also going to form Dalmatia, because Venetian ideas are really weak. So you also have good ground, because they usually want to chill for the first 30 years in the game. So probably the first session. Yeah, 30-40 years is the first session. So what's your mid-game or late-game goal as Austria? Usually I would always say you have 3 formations that are really good. The first is the Poland formation, which is maybe really hard, so we're not going to talk that much about it, because you can check my Hungary guide, how to play Hungary in EU4 multiplayer guide. For the talk about Hungary, talk about Poland, sorry. It's essentially the same. You get one of the best idea sets in the game, but you do not get Eastern, which is a bummer. My personal favorite for playing Austria would be the formation of the proud nation of Germany. While it's not historical for the history fans of you, it's one of the better techs. It's not one of the strongest techs because it lacks some modifiers, but it offers you 15% infantry compatibility, an additional devotion or republican tradition if you're either a theocracy or a republic, 10% tech cost, which is not that important at Tech 20, where you get the option to form Germany, 10% trade efficiency, 5% discipline, 0.5 yearly army tradition, 5% administrative efficiency, 20% goods produced. The other modifiers like national unrest and diplomatic relation are pretty much useless in multiplayer. The missions you get are really nice and are also kind of broken, but you're not going to be able to put a lot of them to use. So I would exclude them from talking. So let's focus on Austria's idea set at the end. Why Austria actually does not need to form a nation as soon as possible. Austria's mission set includes 10% morale at the starting date and 5% discipline in most mods, 3% in vanilla. This is something I really think Paradox should already do in vanilla. Reinforced speed is actually a nice modifier. It's one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated modifier in modern EU4. Because with the Merc change, which was one of the worst changes in MP history, I'm not even kidding, it's actually really good because you cannot just recruit 10,000 new Mercs, because you actually need to reinforce now, which is a nice change of flavor, but I really dislike it. But that's just my personal opinion. You also get the Fugger banking, which would be inflation per annum 0.5 and inflation reduction, which is really nice because you have a gold mine, the province in Intal, which is a really important province for you. You usually get an event around 1461, 1463 to my experience, which gives you an additional local goods produced +1, which equals exactly 5 dipdev. So you essentially get 3.3 ducats for free from this province, on top of your already existing development, which would be boosted to 10 anyways. You can also do 11, but I prefer 10. So, with this province, which would be your economic capital, you can do a lot of good things. Once the Germany formation is done, you are probably already a strong enough nation to do most of the stuff yourself. The thing is, if you want to aim for another formation, you could try to make a trade deal regarding the Prussia formation, or in other hands, you could always try to go for Italy formation, which doesn't offer you the greatest of idea sets, but it offers you a good mission set, which is also nice to have. While Austria is one of the nations that can win a game, I would not recommend to you to play Austria if you would have the goal of being the highest min-maxer, because Austria is more of a medium-sized nation at game start. Austria can be hard, Austria can be rewarding. It's a really difficult start for newcomers, because usually it's a death war with either Bohemia or Venice, or even both of them. And if you want to play it properly and well, I would always try to aim for the fact to get 2 of these 3 nations around you as an ally, which would be Venice, Hungary and Bohemia. But always Hungary. Hungary has always to be one of them. Otherwise, you will get into a multiple front war, and this one you will probably lose. Religion wise, you either go for Orthodox or you go Protestant, Reformed in mods like the Monkey Band Jungle League mods, because the Vendor of Faith is reworked there. Thanks for watching, and comment something below if you have any other ideas or want discussion.